And it's BBOR Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia at heart and from around the globe. Hello, everybody. How is everybody doing? Yes, I'm trying to get back into the old swings of saying things that, all right, hello, everybody. Today is Wednesday. It's time for the AMA, the Ask Me Anything, where I respond to your questions and comments. We go through things together and we have a discussion. That's what I used to say back in the day, back in the older days of Black Box Online Radio. I used to do Wednesday as an AMA where you guys can ask anything you want, true crime related, put your questions in the comment section, now the live chat, and I will try my best to respond to them. But as you see from the title of this episode, the first question comes to us from Adam Ivester, who is the one who requested a response to the story of Gonzalo Lira. Adam Ivester runs the channel Let's Go Sleuthing, and he's a close follower of the Zodiac mysteries and the Jack the Ripper case as well. But he asked me what did I think about the death of Gonzalo Lira, and I simply said that at the time I had not heard of this story. I was not familiar with it. Gonzalo Lira was a Chilean American who went by the name Coach Red Pill online, and he moved to the Ukraine. And in the spring of 2023, he was arrested in the Ukraine for making lots of pro Russian statements. He was incarcerated for several months and he passed away only several days ago, actually. And even though this is a story where I'm going to be following the news and chasing the news, and maybe these types of comments will come out a little bit prematurely, I just have to notice that, all right, this guy seems like a provocateur. He's in the red pill space, firstly, so it seems like he has no problem pushing boundaries or saying things that are going to be challenged by people, because a lot of people who have those types of pill ideologies, red pill, black pill, omni pill, white pill, all of them, they don't mind confrontation. But as far as this goes, even though I'm not extremely familiar with this story, it sounds like that this is a horrible case of a free speech violation. And there was another YouTuber out there named John Anthony who made a statement that this guy was in the Ukraine. He knew it was illegal to spread propaganda in the way that he was doing. He knew that that could get him arrested, and he did it anyway. Therefore, we shouldn't really feel anything for him. And Brenda's here. Brenda says, let's do this for the podcast. Chill pill. Yes, take the chill pill, not the red pill, the chill pill. And as far as that goes, I mean, this guy knew he was breaking the law. He shouldn't have said those things. Now, what the Ukrainians did by throwing him in jail for making pro Russian statements, maybe that was illegal in their country, but we're talking about free speech versus freedom of speech. And I think that this is a pure free speech violation. And I'm not a free speech absolutist. I remove comments from my YouTube channel all the time if somebody is um, doing things like bullying, or they're insulting someone's family members, insulting murder victims or the victims in the true crime stories. I just don't want that on my channel. And the difference you can say is that there is a particular type of ownership that I might have or control that I have over the channel. But Elon Musk and Tucker Carlson both made statements about how they also think that this is a free speech violation, that someone was arrested and jailed simply for having a different point of view. In some of the news articles, it says that this guy, Gonzalo Lira, was tortured. However, I mean, the news is still coming out. I'll just leave it at that. But in terms of how and why he got arrested, I heard on the channel Playing with Fire, and again, this might sound like it is another premature statement, but some of these people who knew Gonzalo Lira personally said that he had a heart condition. He had a heart condition that he knew about, and he might have tried to get arrested on purpose because he knew he wasn't going to live that long, and he wanted to die as a martyr. And I'm like, you guys knew him. I didn't. That is just something that I heard on a different YouTube channel. But I do stand by everything that I said about how someone has simply been jailed for expressing a different type of opinion. And I do think that that is a very, very, well, ridiculous thing. And the Ukrainians have their reasons, but I still would say that it is ridiculous. And I'm not making any comments about being pro Russia or pro Ukraine. I have not followed those events in the longest of times. Just simply saying you're throwing someone in jail because he said something about the government that you didn't like or that wasn't in line with your agenda is something that I am personally opposed to. Now, the next comment comes to us from Paul Alexis, the next question that is, and it relates to the 1997 murder of Billie-Jo Jenkins. Billie-Jo Jenkins was a young teenager that was murdered in Hastings in England, and the prime suspect in her murder was her foster father, Sean Jenkins. They have the same last name, but there is no relation. And back in 2018, I did a 5-part podcast series on the murder of Billie-Jo Jenkins, and it's a very perplexing story because there are three main theories that are involved. One of them is that Billie-Jo Jenkins was murdered by her foster father, Sean Jenkins. One of them is that she was murdered by the M25 rapist, Anthony Imiela. And the third one is that she was murdered by an unidentified prowler. And there was another suspect involved who simply went by the alias Mr. B. And people have provided me with some evidence about how he should be exonerated, but just to say an unknown man, so I'm not going to comment on that too much. But with the story of Billie-Jo Jenkins, she was painting a door that went out to the patio of her family's house. And the two other girls that were the children of Sean Jenkins wanted to participate in the painting, but they needed to go to a store to buy white spirit, which I've gathered is what I in America would call turpentine, but they called it white spirit in the UK. And her father took this very bizarre, their father, the girl's father, took a very bizarre driving path to go to the store, forgot his wallet, and then is going back in and out of the house. And ultimately, Billie-Jo is found dead. She was killed by blunt force trauma with a rather long tent spike. Hey, Pedro is here. Pedro Rockin from PI. All the best, Ned, from Pedro. Hey, thank you so much, Pedro, for your regular and consistent support of this channel over the years. And hello to you too, Orange, and hello, Andrew. But as far as Billie-Jo's case goes, she is murdered by blunt force trauma. She was killed with a rather long tent spike, which is more or less just a metal spike of sorts. But the problem is, though, at the time when the girls left the house, Billie-Jo was still alive. I said the father drives back to the house, Sean Jenkins. He walks in, and he's in the house for approximately 3 minutes, and he comes back out with no visible signs of blood on his body. And they're like, well, how could he have murdered her in that short amount of time and destroyed all the blood if she's killed by blunt force trauma? Well, they discovered 153 micro droplets of blood that were found on Sean Jenkins' fleece. He was wearing a long sleeve fleece. And again, he's exhibiting bizarre behavior. After he finds Billie-Jo dead, first he picks up her body to try and just to see if he can get any signs of life. That's not bizarre. That's not the bizarre part. But after that, he goes back and he sits in his car, just in the driver's seat, and people are almost wondering, is he trying to account for something about how some type of evidence could be left there? And you guys know, what's my favorite saying? Being weird is not a crime. Just because someone is exhibiting strange behavior that we don't understand, it doesn't mean that they are necessarily a murderer, because the question from Paul Alexis is, how could he have destroyed the blood evidence in that small 3-minute window? As I said, he's driving to the store, forgets his wallet, and I don't even want to restate the timeline, but more or less, because I don't want to make any mistakes. The important part is, he's got two other girls with him, his daughters. They leave the house, and Billie-Jo is still alive. They get in the car, they drive, he comes back, parks in the driveway, and then he walks in the house, and he is only alone with her for 3 minutes. And to kill someone with blunt force trauma and only have 153 microdroplets of blood on his fleece, how is that possible? Not only how is it possible, but how could he have destroyed the blood evidence? No matter what you think of his personality and his weird choices, I mean, the defense team put forward the explanation that he got the microdroplets on his blood when he touched her body to try and see if there were any signs of life, and she could have even have exhaled what's called a post-mortem mist, and she gave some type of exhaling that would have caused that. And also the microdroplets were only found on the front of his fleece, not on the back. And somebody once sent me a comment saying that the reason why there weren't any microdroplets of blood on the back of his fleece is because he was 6'4", striking a girl with a 10 spike. Then the blood mist would not transfer to the back because he was that tall. I think that's ridiculous. Ultimately, I ended up thinking that he was not guilty, and his current wife thought the same thing. He was arrested and convicted for it, but he began corresponding with a woman in prison, and she ultimately just said the same thing, that she was a nurse, and thought there was no possible way that this man committed the murder of Billie-Jo Jenkins and had that little amount of blood on him. And the true challenge question is if he did commit the murder, how did he destroy all the blood evidence? Not only from his hands or something like that you could wash off, but also micro droplets on his clothing. Ultimately, I think he's innocent, even if he is a weird guy. And he has explanations for everything. Why did he take a weird driving path to the store? Well, it's just easier to make the turn going this way. I do that too. My family hates being in the car with me because they're just like, you take, 3 right turns to avoid taking a left. Yeah, I do stuff like that. He forgot his wallet at the store. People do things like that. And we have a comment coming to us from Andrew WVA. Hi, Ned. I emailed you something about the Colonial Parkway murders. Oh, yes, I'm paying attention, and I received that. And that was actually the next story that I was going to be talking about. And Andrew WVA sent the email, and I'm going to just read this real fast. It says, Hello, Ned. I'm looking forward to your live cast on Wednesday, and I wanted to mention something that would be of interest to your listeners. There was a big piece of news recently that 3 victims in the Colonial Parkway murder case were traced back via DNA to a man named Alan Wade Wilmer, who passed away in 2017. Yes, the Colonial Parkway murders were a set of homicides that took place in Virginia, and someone has been connected to some of the murders, but not all. What is less well known, however, is that Alan Wilmer Sr. was seriously looked at as a suspect by the authorities way back in 1988 after the disappearance of Cassandra Halley. Yes, Cassandra Halley and Richard Cole. Both were included as victims in the Colonial Parkway murders. The pair attended a party together in Newport News, and Cole's husband's vehicle was found on the same morning of their disappearance back on April 10th of 1988. Author Blaine L. Perdo went into detail on this connection in his blog, Notes from the Bunker, excuse me. Mr. Pardo has also written a book on the Colonial Parkway murders titled A Special Kind of Evil. Now, there's something that I have to share with you guys, and that is that high-profile suspects can get put under the microscope and they can get out. The prime suspect can get put under the microscope and the police can turn them free. We saw this very clearly with the murder of Nancy Benelak when the man who was ultimately found to be her killer linked via DNA, what's his name, Richard Davis, right? He was investigated by the police. They looked into him because he's in the apartment complex where Nancy Benelak was murdered. She was, it's in 1970, October of 1970. What's the exact date? Is it October 25th, 26th. It's around 11:30 p.m. I remember that much. But yes, Nancy Benelak was murdered, stabbed to death inside of her apartment. And ultimately, in 2022, they identified the killer via DNA. But just because someone is interrogated and looked at closely by the police, it doesn't mean they will catch him. Back to Andrew's email. With the disappearance of Keith Call and Cassandra Haley, on April 10th of 1988, the FBI became involved with the case rather haphazardly because of mismanagement of the U.S. Park Service with Call's car. Irv Wells, as a special agent in charge, dusted off the profile for the behavioral science unit from the Delsky Thomas case, the first victims in the Colonial Parkway murders. That profile indicated that they should be looking for a waterman, a local fisherman. They looked into Peeping Tom cases on the Parkway. One stood out. This man we now know as Wilmer. He is someone who's been tied to 3 of the murders. And the young man had long hair. He banged on the window, asking, "Are you girls having fun?" When he saw one was a male, he backed off. Sorry, that's just a little bit of a humorous situation, even though the ending is not humorous. But they had a description of his blue truck, complete with oversized tires, rifle rack, and the distinctive EM Raw license plate. The FBI spotted him and tracked them down and did drive-by undercover surveillance. This was 4 days before Keith and Cassandra went missing. He was seen spray painting the bed of his truck, vacuuming the inside, and the FBI feared that he was doing potential evidence. He was destroying potential evidence and got a warrant. They searched the trailer that he lived in and found weapons, handcuffs, and pornography. What they didn't find was anything that tied him directly to the appearance. Well, are you guys hearing that? It sounds like he destroyed all the evidence. Hey, Andrew, thank you for sharing that with me, by the way. Now, I've heard of some similar true crime cases here in West Virginia where they were able to track down everything that had happened. You're talking about the spray paint? That's what reminded me of it. Just some teenagers doing graffiti and so on, and they're hiding the spray paint here and there. And the reason why I'm sharing this is some teenagers in West Virginia once spray painted something, and then they went to a guy and said, "Hey, can we spray paint your truck and just change the color so we have an excuse and an alibi and we won't get caught?" And he's like, "Yeah, sure, whatever." And even that guy also got charged with vandalism because he was a participant in covering up their vandalism. Oh, yes, for something like that, the authorities can track them down real fast. But with a murder investigation, they just let the perpetrator go. Now, it seems like this Alan Wilmer guy was a little bit more skillful at destroying the evidence and evading capture, and he's being very sneaky and very secretive, whereas these teenagers were reckless and obnoxious. That's probably the ultimate thing that saved him from getting caught, as terrible as that is. But here, it sounds like this Alan Wilmer could be guilty of many more crimes in the Colonial Parkway murders. Thanks again for sharing this with me, Andrew. And here's something else that will give us a little bit more optimism about how cold cases can be solved, and there can also be convictions, and people can be brought to trial. On Facebook, my Facebook name is Ned DeHaan, my personal Facebook, I shared some of the news about how the Long Island serial killer suspect Rex Heuermann has been charged for the fourth murder in the Gilgo Beach murders, and that totals the Gilgo Four. He was charged finally with the murder of Maureen Brainerd Barnes recently, and people have been following the Long Island serial killer mystery for years. I first did episodes on it back in 2021, and I was very optimistic that it could be solved. However, I didn't think it would even be this fast, but we still don't know who's responsible for the murders from 1996 to 2007, beginning with the murder of Karen Vergata and the final murder of the Cherries Jane Doe in 2007. And Tinsel TQ says, Ned, we'll be interested to hear if you've been following all of the speculation in the Idaho 4 case. No, I'm really not up to date on that one. I'm going to have to look into that and do a future episode to see if there's a new news breakthrough in the Idaho 4. Cody Allen says, enjoyed your interview with Richard. Yes, I was interviewed by Richard Grinnell of ZodiacCiphers.com, and that interview is available on the Zodiac Killer channel. Thank you to everybody who watched and listened to that one, by the way. I think Richard is a great interviewer, and he has his own show, Zodiac Speaking, which he co-hosts with Mike Morford, and there was a recent episode that came out on there as well, episode number 39, talking about the disappearance of Donna Lass and the discovery of Donna Lass's remains. Tinsel says, your ability to retain such vast knowledge on so many cases is impressive. I forget things all the time, though. You know, Tinsel, your ability to retain such vast knowledge on so many cases is impressive. I can't remember the grocery list to save my life. I walk into the supermarket, and I'm like, what was it we said we needed? I mean, we spent all week talking about it. I can't remember that stuff. I can't remember what I put in my bag or I did not. Where did I put my papers? I forget everything else. You would not believe it. It's ridiculous. But thank you for that. And Brenda Keating says, if being weird was a crime, I'm doing life with no parole. That's a good one, Brenda. Batman 66 is here. Hey, Bruce Wayne, how you doing? Why is it that when so many serial killers get caught, or even convicted, they still refuse to come clean, meaning not giving the family some closure or say they were or maybe where so-and-so was buried? Well, the honest answer is each person's going to be different. Now, some people simply don't care, and they just don't want to talk about it. They're all about their own agenda. Other people are still kind of hoping for some type of reward in the end, clemency, or they want to try and clear their name, and they're simply trying to show that they are reformed criminals. Maybe they've converted to a particular religion in prison, and they're just trying to be a model inmate. And then if they were to suddenly reveal that they've been lying to everybody for 10 years or 20 years or 30 years, then it would be like, hey, wait a second, why didn't you say that 30 years ago? It would make them look bad. Ted Bundy was somebody who really wanted to get, clemency. He was afraid of dying. And also, there are some people that just only are thinking about themselves. And I'm going to be talking about this in a future interview that I did for the Anything Goes Friday segment. And it's about even tying into the serial killer Gordon Northcott, the Wineville chicken coop killer, when he was saying that, he just wants to be saved. He wants to convert to Christianity. He wants to make sure that if there is a hell, he won't go to it. All about himself. Perfect example, Batman 66. He didn't give closure to the victims. He didn't answer the questions. All he's thinking about is himself. So that's my ultimate take on that. And we did have one question that came in more or less on this subject. And It's kind of a two-part question. Has there been any attempt to interview the Golden State Killer? Would I try to interview the Golden State Killer, Joseph D'Angelo? My honest answer is I think if I were given that opportunity, I should use it. However, on a personal level, the answers to the questions that I actually want are not going to be there. I mean, because we've already seen everything. The answers to the questions that I want have already been shared about the crimes that he committed. I mean, maybe if there's some additional murders out there. But yes, we know that he had some traumatic experiences in his childhood. We know he had a bad experience with his fiancee, Bonnie. And more or less about just trying to talk to him to get those answers about what drove him to kill. He was a messed up individual, and he openly abused the system by using knowledge from his profession against the people he was supposed to protect. He was a member of law enforcement who worked in an anti burglary task force, and he's using the anti burglary measures to burglarize people, to rape people, and to murder people. That's the big secret to Joseph D'Angelo. I suppose if I were given the chance, I could do that. And there might be some things that I would challenge him on, mostly about are there any additional crimes that he committed? And I was just reading about one of the Granite Bay murders that happened about 5 or 6 years after the end of the Golden State Killer's reign of terror, and he's a suspect in that one. Oh, is he compos mentis? Um, I don't know about that. Is that sort of like being a nutcase or something, Tinsel? But Batman 66 says 16 degrees in Southwest PA and 4 inches of snow. Ah, you guys are quite lucky to get snowfall in America. As most of you know, I'm always coming to you from West Virginia at heart, as is Andrew in the chat. But I am in the Philippines now, and you know, sometimes it gets cold enough to wear long sleeves, like 2 days out of my entire time here. But no, we don't get any snow, and most people here have never even seen snow. So that's you guys can kind of take that as a blessing. But I do want to make some announcements for the channel. Firstly, there will be the return of the Anything Goes Friday segment, and Black Box Online Radio is returning to the old lineup. Every Monday is Zodiac Monday, Wednesday is the AMA, the Ask Me Anything, and Friday is an Anything Goes where any subject is fair game. And I'm going to be releasing a lot of the true crime interviews on Friday. It won't be like the old Anything Goes segments where it's just going to be me talking about something. I decided to use some of that time for interviews. Maybe if there is not an opportunity to have a guest on the program, I'll do an Anything Goes episode by myself. But I'm trying to make it a little bit more interactive. And I do plan on releasing a bonus episode this week. I had Justin Daneman on the program. He's the author of the book Ghosts of War. And we were talking about the Mandela effect. And I'm going to take a portion of the interview and put that out by itself in a standalone episode, and there'll be a little bit of additional commentary coming out this weekend. And of course, the next chapter in the book, Down the Dark Lane, 3 Thrillers from the Motel, already on to the second story. And the third story is the sequel to Killer on a White Horse. And Tinsel says, as in, would D'Angelo even be able to hold an interview, I wonder? Yes, I think he can. I think all of this stuff about D'Angelo being an old senile man is an act. I think it's fraudulent. I think he is just putting on a show. And I think that even now in 2024, he probably would still be capable of going through the interview. And we have a question from Christopher Valdez. Have you heard the new DB Cooper news? Heard it? Yes. No, I didn't hear it. I read it. It was like on the headlines that there was some type of breakthrough in the DB Cooper case, but I only read the headline that there was some type of DB Cooper news. Hey, Christopher, if you have any additional details, would you like to share that in the chat? And I'll see if I can respond to that. And, oh, yes, Batman 66, was that you that sent me that DB Cooper might actually be from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania? Now, wait a second, guys. I'm drawing an enormous blank on this. Was the DB Cooper suspect Milton Vordahl from Pennsylvania? I know that I don't want to just be doing random Google searches while I'm in the AMA, but it was Milton Vordahl. He is one of the new suspects that is getting more and more widely discussed. So according to the 1940 census, does the FBI know about Milton Vordahl? Let's just go to norjack.org. It's a pretty reliable DB Cooper website for all types of pieces of information. And in all seriousness, for a long time, I thought that perhaps my top DB Cooper suspect would have been Ted Braden, but that is when I learned about Milton Vordahl. He is someone who was working with rare metals. He has patents under his name. He is somebody who he had a problem with an individual named what was it, Don Cooper or something like that, and they think that maybe he was making a mockery of his name as well as, of course, the comic book. But here's the stuff. Milton Vordahl, following the war, moved back to the East Coast and joined the Crucible Steel Company outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So that's just another thing, though. The problem with Milton Vordahl as the D.B. Cooper suspect is he was like 58 years old at the time of the skyjacking, and some guy's 58 years old just going to jump out of a plane into the dark, into clouds, wearing loafers, not even boots, no helmet, just like the suit without the tie, mind you. But that's some stuff that I do think about. Pedro says Ted Braden was DB Cooper. You know, Ted Braden is one of the strongest DB Cooper suspects, only because he was not only because there are countless reasons. He was an extremely skilled paratrooper. I don't know, about like 58 years old, as I said, jumping out of a plane into the dark without a lot of experience. And when I read about Milton Vordahl, I don't see a lot of things that indicate that he would have even had a paratrooping or skydiving background. Ted Braden was an excellent skydiver, excellent parachutist, if that is a word. And one thing that Drew Beeson, author of the book Paratrooper of Fortune, says is that Ted Braden could also steer the parachute that was used by D.B. Cooper. A lot of people say D.B. Cooper would have had to have died during the jump because that type of parachute couldn't be maneuvered. One thing Drew Beeson shares in his book is that, yes, it could be maneuvered. Ted Braden learned how to use that type of parachute when he was working on emergency rigs. So, and Batman 66 says that the Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania suspect is not Milton Vordahl, but it is a new suspect. You know, it's like, maybe it wasn't him. I mean, is it somebody else who worked for the steel company or something like that? Milton Vordahl does have a very strong resemblance to the D.B. Cooper composite sketches. And I've interviewed Jeremy Berthium on the channel before, and he is someone who believes that Kenny Christensen was D.B. Cooper. And he said that he thought that Ted Braden was a very strong suspect, but he has to point out that Ted Braden doesn't have an extremely strong resemblance to the sketches, particularly that his nose is much larger than all of them. And even I've thought about this. When you look at the composite sketches of D.B. Cooper, the nose just gets extremely narrow. Even Jeremy's suspect, Kenny Christensen, doesn't have a nose that is that narrow. And another point about composite sketches, whether it's the Zodiac Killer or D.B. Cooper or any of these other cases, like when they're trying to hunt the racist killer, Joseph Paul Franklin, or the I-65 killer, Harry Greenwell, they had composite sketches, right? But the composite sketch is not a photograph. It's not what the person actually looked like. It's what the witness thought they looked like. It's just somebody's impression of that. But a big difference between the Zodiac Killer case and the D.B. Cooper case is people spent hours with D.B. Cooper. With the Zodiac case, you have like, how long does it take for the Zodiac to leave Paul Stein's taxi? I mean, 45 seconds, 1 minute maybe, probably not even that. And these people are looking at this out of a window from a house. They are not even up close and personal with the guy. So the Zodiac composite sketches are useless. The D.B. Cooper sketches, maybe. And Christopher Valdez says, Vince Peterson is the suspect's name. He died in 2002. Again, I hate to be Googling too much when I'm on the live stream. I'm not familiar with the suspect. Vince Peterson, D.B. Cooper, all kinds of things are coming up. Okay. Oh, it actually says that he's been out for a little while. There's source. This much you can say about Eric Goulas. He doesn't. The annual CooperCon in Vancouver believed for years that Sheridan Peterson was the celebrated D.B. Cooper skyjacker. And I've looked into Sheridan Peterson a little bit, but I'm not overly impressed by him. And Peterson was abandoned as the organizer's suspect about a year ago when he couldn't find anyone in the former smoke jumper's law. Now, why'd you call him a smoke jumper? Do you guys know what a smoke jumper is? Do you guys know what that is in terms of like profane behavior? The skyjacker who bought a $20 plane ticket on the Portland International flight used the name Dan Cooper. All right, you guys know about all of this. So let's just get to the part about the new suspect. And we are going down here. Vince Peterson and his life and work, finding what could be connections to the skyjacking. There have also been searches through the FBI files. Okay, get to the point, all right. The possible motive for Peterson to hold a plane full of passengers hostage for money was in 1971, the steel industry was beset by labor strife and economic upheaval, with some 47,000 steel workers in western Pennsylvania alone laid off or temporarily idle. The New York Times reported that they haven't been able to determine if Sheridan Peterson himself faced a pink slip. Oh, not Sheridan Peterson. No, we're doing Vince Peterson. It just says Peterson himself faced a pink slip in the months before the skyjacking. Peterson worked in the Crucible's Pittsburgh-based titanium research laboratory. He died in 2002 at the age of 83. So what this is talking about, right, is D.B. Cooper's tie was left behind, and they have these weird metallic particles that should not be available to someone in the general public that are found on the tie. And that's why some people think it was Milton Bordeaux, because, again, he worked with countless types of metals, and there are patents about metals in his name, and it just seems like someone who wouldn't be a lay person in this field. And the skyjacker known as D.B. Cooper became a folk hero in the 1970s as the audacious criminal who stuck it to the man without hurting anyone and got away. Now, D.B. Cooper was a criminal, let's be clear. But I talk about a lot of serial killer cases on this show. And there's a certain sensitivity that you have to approach with respect to the victims, because people were murdered, and there's absolutely nothing that glorifies the actions of the serial killer. Nothing at all. But with D.B. Cooper, we can at least admit that he didn't actually try and hurt anyone, and he took some money that also wasn't stealing from the people. It's kind of from just this non-humanized entity, for lack of a better term. Still wrong, but at the same time, I definitely think there's a different way that I would approach the D.B. Cooper case as opposed to a serial killer case. And Eric Eulis has talked to Vince Peterson's son and said that the son does not believe that his father was D.B. Cooper. As far as he knew, his father was an honest person. I think my father's an honest person too, my friend, whoever you are. But that doesn't mean anything. I mean, guys, does that mean anything? He thinks his father was an honest person. Back to the serial killer stories. How many times have you heard someone just say that someone turns out to be a serial killer? I had no idea. Somebody turns out to be a criminal of a different kind. I had no idea. No, he is just such a nice and respectable guy. He's a prominent member of the community. It means nothing. Especially something like D.B. Cooper. Batman66 says, titanium research engineer with Boeing, Vince Peterson, lost his job and was bitter. Maybe, but according to this article from the Oregonian, they aren't 100% sure that he was included in these layoffs, but somebody who just wants to get some type of revenge on that. But as I understand, Batman66, aren't you of the belief that D.B. Cooper did not survive the skyjacking? And there is a reasonable case for that, except for the fact that you would think that if they have found all of the things like the money at Tina Bar and so on, if they found 3 stacks of money from the D.B. Cooper skyjacking, wouldn't they be able to find the parachute? Let's say, hypothetically, if D.B. Cooper died in the skyjacking, wouldn't they be able to find the parachute as well? Oh, Batman66 says, a smoke jumper fights forest fires and jumps from the plane ahead of the fire, etc. Okay, I was thinking about something that was some type of twisted sexual metaphor. That's what comes to mind first, and use your imagination. Andrew WVA says, have they established his whereabouts at the time of the skyjacking? Let's keep reading here. And, oh my goodness, that's the end of the article. Well, that doesn't give us a whole lot of info. But Andrew, as far as whereabouts at the time of the skyjacking, countless suspects will come up. And there'll be people living in all types of different states. And You even have people like John Emil List who go on to become D.B. Cooper suspects who are just more or less a criminal on the run, and they're just like roaming about, so to speak. And you have people like E. Howard Hunt, CIA, who would always have an explanation. Jeff Jones is here. Hi, Jeff. How are you doing? So there are all types of, just even with the Zodiac case, sometimes people get accused of the Zodiac killer, of being the Zodiac killer, and they didn't regularly live in the state of California. I've talked about loads of them on the channel that they would have had to have flown in, or maybe they could have been in California for the time being, but that begs the question is how they're mailing all of these letters on weekdays. Jeff says he's doing well, thanks. You're welcome, Jeff. And I do have one more small piece of true crime news to discuss with you guys. And this is a challenge question that was proposed from the Adam McIntyre channel. And as I said, I was watching that one because of the videos that were done about Gypsy Rose Blanchard. And it was more or less that Gypsy Rose Blanchard was a participant in the orchestration of her mother, Dee Dee Blanchard, because her mother was severely abusing her in a case of Munchausen syndrome by proxy. She was murdered by Gypsy Rose's boyfriend, Nick Godejohn, and Gypsy Rose Blanchard pleaded guilty to second-degree murder. And the ultimate challenge question that was asked on this channel was, should she be viewed as a murderer? And my honest answer is yes. The reason why this challenge question was being asked was because Gypsy Rose Blanchard appeared on someone's podcast, and she said that she didn't see herself as a murderer because she didn't actually commit the murder. She only was involved with the organizing. She's like, I didn't do that. The ex-boyfriend did it. Ruth Ellis says, I think she's a murderer. I do too. Countless times we have had nonviolent offenders get charged with murder. Someone who is doing the participation, the organizing, the setup, the arranging. Sometimes it's not even done that way. Like they're trying to rob somebody and somebody gets murdered. All the participants get charged with murder. And Gypsy Rose Blanchard entered the plea of second-degree murder, so she didn't have to go to trial, so she could get 10 years, serve 10 years of the sentence, and then she was able to be released from prison. I mean, firstly, she's a convicted murderer. She was found guilty of... She entered the guilty plea for murder, so she's definitely a murderer in the legal sense. But she's like, I didn't actually do the killing. You're still a murderer. That's how this thing works. Charles Manson went to prison for life for arranging. Yeah, but the problem is, even though Charles Manson was an entertaining guy who talked into circles, who wrote maybe 2 good songs. I can think of 2 Manson songs that I actually like. He did a lot of other terrible things. For example, he shot Bernard Crowe. That's one of them, even though Bernard Crowe didn't die from that. He cut off Gary Hinman's ear. And when I interviewed Brian Davis of the Tate LaBianca radio program here on this channel, he said that one of the medical examiners had thought that Gary Hinman could have even died from being cut in the ear by Charles Manson. That could have caused I can only expect it would have caused some type of infection because Gary Hinman was alive for a couple of days after the murder, after the attack on Charles Manson, not after the murder. And as I said, that was from one of the true crime interviews that I've done on this channel. Ruth Ellis says Bernard Crowe was the Black Panther, right? Yes, he was. Yes, but I've done a couple of true crime interviews here on this channel, and if anybody has any requested guests, you can put your ideas in the comment section down below. If there are requested topics that you'd like to hear about for the Anything Goes Friday segment, you can put your ideas in the comment section down below. For longer things, you can send them to me at BlackBoxOnlineRadio@AOL.com. You can also get me on Facebook. My name is Ned DeHaan. I have a Facebook page for Black Box Online Radio as well, and BlackBoxNed88 on Instagram. And if you'd like to support any of these efforts, you can go to BuyMeACoffee.com. BuyMeACoffee.com/BlackBoxNed88 allows you to make a donation or contribution to help support the show. And anybody who makes a donation will get a shout-out on Zodiac Monday. Every Monday is Zodiac Monday here on Black Box Online Radio. And I have a question for you guys. Recently on Zodiac Monday, I've been trying to create this blend of my commentary with the interviews. I'm talking and then I switch over to the interview as well as playing video clips from other people's channels, sometimes audio clips from other people's channels. What do you think about that? Do you like that, or is there some other different way that you'd like to arrange the format on Black Box Online Radio? And please feel free to share. Jeff Jones says Gypsy Rose Blanchard's mom was the most evil. Oh, yes, absolutely. And one point that Adam McIntyre brings up is something that I didn't really think about in 2019 when I first learned the story of Gypsy Rose Blanchard. And that was, if she didn't do something, her mother would have killed her. Now, I don't condone the murder because there are ways that Gypsy Rose could have dealt with this situation. Just people are saying that her mental state was probably so damaged because of the abuse that she was dealing with. She certainly was dealing with post-traumatic stress. So that's why she went about it the way she was. But so many people have asked the question about why didn't she just leave? Her mother was abusing her, poisoning her. Why didn't she just run away? And the honest answer is that she did. And this is a story that was dramatized in the show The Act, but I don't think that their dramatization was accurate. The story that I heard from a documentary was that Gypsy Rose Blanchard runs over to some guy's apartment, and the mom actually slides the birth certificate under the door and saying, she's 14 or 15 or whatever it was. Look here, you have to let her go. And that person let her go, and she just thought that there's no way she can escape this abuse without doing something like that. Again, immoral, but that's what her thought process was. But the comment from Adam McIntyre, I think, is more valuable when he said she would have killed Gypsy Rose ultimately. And I hadn't really thought about that because it seemed that Dee Dee Blanchard's plan was just to use her as a cash cow. She wanted to abuse her and also get things like the free house from Habitat for Humanity. But ultimately, she probably would have, because people in that situation would not want to go to jail. They would not want to face the embarrassment. And also, they would rather kill the person than lose control of them. Terrible, terrible things that Dee Dee Blanchard did to Gypsy Rose. Jeff Jones says, you have not fully realized what her mother did to her. You would agree with me if you did. That's not talking about me. That's talking about a comment from Ruth Ellis, who said her mom was evil, but she could have reached out and gotten help. She was using the internet. Yeah, Ruth, she could have. She could have, but as I said, she thought it wouldn't work. And also, she was confused. Also, she was not in the right state of mind. But yeah, I know. Yeah, Ruth, I got that now. Sorry, Jeff is talking to me. That's what Ruth said. I got that now. But the overall problem is that there have also been some more discussions about the comments that I used to think about in the past, that the boyfriend, Nick Godejohn, was somebody who had a low IQ, he had autism spectrum disorder. And another thing that I heard from a different YouTuber was he might actually have like a variant of schizophrenia. And I've talked about all that stuff in the past. But what's going to happen now is that he's going to try and appeal his conviction because of all of these statements that are being made by Gypsy Rose Blanchard in the media, when she's just saying, I'm not a murderer, I had nothing to do with it. I had nothing to do with the actual killing, therefore I'm not a murderer. She's out on parole, meaning that she's supposed to demonstrate that she did the crime, she did the time, and she learned her lesson. Department of Corrections, right? Well, what has been corrected? She is saying, no, I didn't do anything wrong. It was all his fault. And they're pointing out that Nick Godejohn has been extremely cooperative, and he has gone along with everything that's been asked of him. He is admitted to the murder. It doesn't mean that he'll get out anytime soon, but they can appeal the process to see if he gets paroled. The problem is, though, I think he's dangerous. I do. And that was something that I was discussing last week on the live stream when I was exploring the possibility of, if he were to be let out, would he commit another crime again? Because he's using the defense of he was manipulated into committing this murder. If he got manipulated into it so easily and doesn't have control of his impulses, he's dangerous. Maybe in 30 years he won't commit another crime. We will see. And Jeff Jones says she should have gotten medal for disposing of that. What do you mean she should have gotten medal? Not quite sure. And some people are having a discussion in the chat. I'll just leave you guys to it. You seem to understand the context a little bit more. Mr. JSV 650 is here. And hello, how are you doing? Good morning. Thank you for starting your day with some true crime talk radio. Now, I've tried to arrange some more guests on the program to talk to you guys about DB Cooper and so on. I recognize that a lot of people who closely follow the Zodiac case also follow the DB Cooper mystery. But I think that this is one where I'm going to be starting not exactly from the ground up. I just have such a limited knowledge and understanding of DB Cooper, and when they present me with these suspects, like you guys are saying, have you heard about the new suspect from Pittsburgh? And I'm like, no. If it were a new Zodiac suspect, I'd probably be able to share a lot more about it. And another thing from Brian Davis of the Tate LaBianca radio program was he said it takes 4 years to learn about a true crime case. And he closely follows the Manson family and the Tate LaBianca murders. That case has already been solved. When he says it takes 4 years to learn about a true crime case, you have to learn who the people are, who are the good actors and who are the bad actors, who are the good researchers and the bad researchers. Like, is this person honest or is this person deceptive? And there's so many people in the true crime world that are genuinely fraudulent. But I'm not going to name names because I can't prove all of those things. I suspect that they are fraudulent. And then there are people like Gary Stewart who get caught falsifying documents, and that is a genuine fraud. However, I mean, not everybody can really fall into the category of being an honest person. So with something like DB Cooper, maybe in 2 or 3 years I can actually have a real conversation about it. I kid thee not. Now, Ruth Ellis says, that's funny, I've been researching DB Cooper all week. Ruth, do you have a suspect in the DB Cooper case? As I told you, I thought highly of Ted Braden, Milton Vordal. With Kenny Christensen, I comprehend the narrative, but I'm just not quite convinced that all of the explanations have been shared. And one challenge point from Drew Beeson is that Kenny Christensen worked for Northwest Orient. He worked for the airline that was used in the skyjacking, and couldn't he have been easily recognized by somebody who worked for the airline, either getting on the plane or on the plane and so on? Oh, you think Ruth Ellis says that DB Cooper could have been Richard McCoy. He looks good. McCoy was also oh, but you say, but they found the fragments on the tire, referring to the metallic particles. See, that's something about how would Richard McCoy get access to that? And also, Richard McCoy was a real skyjacker. He attempted a skyjacking, but he completely bungled it and did not have the same type of awareness that D.B. Cooper did. Next one is D.B. Cooper, Deep Family Secrets, Part 1, Probable Cause, Dan Greider. Please check this out. The guy is very passionate. You mean he's very passionate that his about the DB Cooper suspect, Richard McCoy? Yeah, McCoy did the second skyjacking, but not very well. Batman66 says, my dad is DB Cooper. You know, Thomas Wayne makes a very good suspect for being DB Cooper, except for the fact that, I mean, he's just so busy with his business empire, let alone he liked to go out to the theater and stuff late at night. And I mean, when you're running a company like Wayne Enterprises, that's just going to take up a lot of your time. He wouldn't have needed the money or anything. And, oh, yes, this guy, Dan Greider, is very passionate about McCoy. Sometimes, when we're following high-profile true crime cases, we cannot get bogged down on the suspects. I've talked to you in this episode about the Long Island serial killer. I have made numerous episodes on the Long Island serial killer. Not once did I ever learn the name Rex Heuermann until the day that he was arrested. And someone shared this with me that the police have been looking at him for years. They just didn't have the evidence. Now, I have trouble believing that. They followed him around and they waited for him to throw away a pizza box and they got DNA from a pizza crust. You couldn't have done that years ago? That's just what I don't know what goes on in these departments and these investigations. But nothing's going to surprise me now. 37 years. It took 37 years to identify Donna Lass's remains. They had them. They discovered them in Placer County in California in 1986. She wasn't identified until 2023. 37 years. Think about all the Jane Doe cases that we have. John Doe cases that we have, unidentified individuals, and their families out there looking for them. And there are people that are trying to solve these cases. I remember back in 2018 when I learned the news that Marcia King was identified. Marcia King was known as the Buckskin Girl, also known as the Buckskin Doe, and she was found on the side of a road, very badly beaten, but she's wearing this very unique type of buckskin poncho, almost like Native American style, and they tried so hard to identify her. They examined her underwear for soot particles to try and find out which parts of the country she had been in. There was an article in USA Today that had talked about how they were looking at the pollen that was on her clothing as well, palynological testing to try and see which parts of the country had she been in. People were trying, and ultimately they were successful. They did identify her as Marcia King, and her mother said that she lived in the same house and kept the same number for 3 decades, just in hopes that Marcia would come home one day. And unfortunately, she was murdered in 1981. But people are trying. It's just this process. I think with Donna Lass, though, they should have been able to identify her before 2023. And they claim that they did do DNA tests on the remains for missing persons cases in the area. I guess they missed Donna. She was on the other side of Lake Tahoe when she disappeared. I'm not trying to make a joke or anything. She was literally on the other side of Lake Tahoe. And this was, about a handful of miles in the other direction from the west side of Lake Tahoe. Was that too complicated? It's shocking. It's shocking. I don't want any weird rage to come out because we should just really celebrate the good news that Donna Lass has been identified and she can rest in peace. Marcia King as well. And some of these other true crime stories that I've been talking about. And Batman66 is asking, hey, Ned, it's been a while since you covered Jack the Ripper. Anything new in the works? I had contemplated doing something, Batman66, and this is something I shouldn't reveal to you, but I'll just kind of start from the beginning. You see there's some episodes like this. I was thinking about doing a video show 5 days a week. And it was going to be like, start your day with some true crime talk radio in the morning, right? And then I was like, a lot of you guys follow the Zodiac mystery, and you don't only want to hear about other cases. So I created this concept of Zodiac 365, where every day I would make a 10-minute video about the Zodiac. But then I thought, I've already made 800 episodes about the Zodiac killer. I kid thee not. Why don't I do that about the Ripper? And this thing about Zodiac 365, I had that idea years ago. But then I thought, why don't I do that about the Ripper? When Ripper Wednesday wasn't performing that well on this channel, I thought, why don't I try that? Ripper 365. Every day, something like a 5 to 10 minute video about Jack the Ripper, done in the same Black Box Online Radio format. Very brief things about the suspects, very brief things about the theories, and also some of the participants that are involved. As I said, 4 years. Going to take 4 years, right, to learn about the true crime cases. Interestingly, I did my first episode on Jack the Ripper 4 years ago. I did one episode in 2019 about the Ripper, and it was about the H.H. Holmes connection. It still is one of my favorite episodes of Black Box Online Radio. If you listen to it, I don't know why, but I guess I was just narrating the episodes in a bit of a different way, and I was kind of talking like this. I wasn't even aware of it at the time. But, so, the honest answer, Batman66, was I contemplated doing that, true crime talk radio. Wouldn't necessarily be 5 days a week anymore, because as I said, I'm going to have to respond to things that are offline and so on. But I do have an announcement, and that is that I will be going back to West Virginia for some, family reasons. Nothing bad, good stuff. Celebrating my father's 70th birthday, actually. I'm going to be doing that in March. So it's a good reason. But I'll be back in West Virginia soon, and also keeping up with a big recording schedule, 365, every single day, 365 days a year. That might not be the most doable thing. Plus, as I said, I've got some work to do offline. But that doesn't really stop me from trying to digest true crime content. I think a lot of you guys are like this, where you probably watch the stuff every day. I don't only watch true crime content. I watch things from all different genres, and like I've just been watching countless psychology videos lately. And my fiance gets kind of mad at me because a lot of them are about starting new relationships and such. And she's like, "Why are you watching that?" Like, no, no, I want to remember who I was before. Like looking at the mistakes that made in the past, and I'm not even making that up. Like thinking about 15 years ago when I just had no idea what to do in life. That stuff. That stuff. I'm not joking. So now Brenda Keating has something different for us. She says, I do find it interesting how Donna lived in the area of the Paul Stein murder. You're not alone, Brenda. Numerous people think that maybe the Zodiac killer knew something about Donna Lass. Maybe he had some type of infatuation with her. Donna Lass lived in San Francisco. She worked at Letterman General Hospital, and Paul Stein was murdered in San Francisco, the final victim of the Zodiac killer. Then Donna moves to Lake Tahoe, and she goes missing. Countless people have thought that. They're just thinking that, no, wait a second. For some reason, was she a specific target? I don't think any of the Zodiac's victims were specific targets. I mean, David Faraday, Betty Lou Jensen, Darlene Ferrin, Cecilia Shepard, Paul Stein. In the past, I thought Cecilia Shepard was a specific target, and that's why she was stabbed. That's why the killer wore the mask, so she wouldn't recognize him and try and talk him out of it. No, I don't think there's any evidence to support that. Okay. There's evidence, but it's like mental gymnastics evidence. So I'm not too impressed with that. And Ruth says, nice. Do you mean nice about the idea of Ripper 365? There's definitely enough material. Absolutely, there's enough material. 365 episodes about Jack the Ripper and so on. So maybe one day. But what I've noticed is there's this overwhelming fascination that people have with the Zodiac case that they don't seem to quite have for Jack the Ripper. And one thing I began to notice is that the episodes on Ripper Wednesday were received rather differently. I absolutely loved doing the Jack the Ripper report because I thought it came out very differently than the Zodiac Killer news reports. On Ripper Wednesday, there was a much bigger blend of the true crime cases with the media that has been associated with Jack the Ripper. You can go back and listen to the playlist because there are so many movies that have been made about Jack the Ripper. And I was just on Facebook and somebody posted the movie poster for the 1959 Jack the Ripper movie, and I've responded to that one, and it's actually a really good film. It's actually a really well-made film. And there are just so many movies, though, about them. There was another one that I watched was Sherlock Holmes and A Study in Terror, where Sherlock is actually looking for Jack the Ripper. They also have The Lodger from 1927, Man in the Attic. So many movies that were there to explore, and also things like poetry. I would often conclude the Ripper Wednesday reports with reading a poem from Francis Thompson, a Jack the Ripper suspect. I did one from Lewis Carroll, also a Jack the Ripper suspect, looking at some of their lesser-known poetry. Oh, and Batman 66 has a question. Are you still contemplating doing a West Virginia in the Woods episode when you're back in March? Now, what Batman 66 is talking about is, if I weren't here, where I am now, if I were just, going to be in West Virginia for the foreseeable future, oh, absolutely. I would just drive out into the woods, one of our national forests, and just kind of like take a mobile recording studio with me. And I would just be sitting outside with the crickets once again, probably holding the camera. No, I'd get a tripod. You don't want to hold the camera. Maybe hold the microphone or something and just kind of like narrate the show like that. Outdoor recordings. Try my best. I mean, in some of the older episodes, you can hear the West Virginia crickets in the background. I'd love to do an outdoor episode, yeah, when I go back to West Virginia in March. That'd be really nice. But I do miss West Virginia National Forest. You see, one of the reasons why is when I was growing up, we didn't have GPS. A lot of you guys understand this, right? So the way that my family would plan out like the weekend vacations, when you have like a 3-day weekend is, we had a map of West Virginia. It's like, Well, let's look at this state park. Let's just go here. Oh, let's look at this campground in southern West Virginia. I lived in eastern West Virginia. Let's just drive there. And because it's a map of West Virginia, we really focused on the West Virginian ones, not really in Kentucky or Virginia or Maryland. So that's why we began exploring places like the national forests. So yes, I would love to just go out there and stay as long as I can. Omar says, "Hello, Ned. Are you a computer hacker?" In that episode where I shared the video clip of the woman accusing me of being a computer hacker, I actually messed up the audio file and I doubled it up so you hear two voices talking at once. And yeah, Mr. JSV says, yes, Omar, he is a hacker from the Philippines. If I were a computer hacker, would I make mistakes like that? Editing the simplest YouTube show in the world, the simplest amount of graphics. I wish I were better with technology. That's all I can say about that. Ruth says, I can't believe she said those things. Yes, but more or less, I've made my public statement. So I don't have any further comments on that. And all I will say is that the woman who made those accusations to her, I'm not going to be responding to any more of her content and not watching her show unless I have a reason. Like, say, for example, someone said, oh, I heard you talking about that program that I won't even name. I was once a guest on it in this episode. And yeah, I'm curious what she had to say because she has some things that she wants to discuss with me. And then, I can give a type of response. And her and I are going to be corresponding with her zodiac theory. Sure. But there's really no reason to discuss about it. Yes, don't talk about her. She'll blow it out of proportion. I've said everything that I have to say, and all of you guys know that stuff's not true. I made my public statement, and I said anything that you've heard in regards to those claims that I'm some type of hacker, they're false. That's just where I'm going to leave it for now. But we have passed the 1 hour mark, and I would like to ask, does anybody have any final questions to share? Otherwise, and I'll be winding down now. And Ruth Ellis says, you're such a nice guy. Thanks, Ruth. You don't seem so bad yourself. But any final questions can be shared here. And other than that, you can tune into Zodiac Monday. Wednesday is now going to be the AMA. Friday is going to be an Anything Goes, where I'm going to have guests on the program. And also, you can look out for the audiobook that comes out on the weekends. Down the Dark Lane has 3 stories in it. I'm on the second story right now. And the third one is the sequel story to Killer on a White Horse. And more or less, the manuscript for the third White Horse Killer saga story has already been completed, so I will be releasing that in 2024 as well. Lots of things to look out here on Black Box Online Radio. One more time, you can hit the like button and subscribe. And Omar says, thank you for the episodes. You're welcome, Omar. No trouble at all. And, I appreciate all of you guys. And one thing that I've really noticed about my audience here is you guys are very reasonable. From time to time, I get someone who's a little bit far out, but they don't stick around too long. The overwhelming majority of people are just curious about true crime cases, unsolved mysteries, all of that. And they want to just hear someone talking about them, evaluating the information and so on. That's good. That's good. That's why I do this. And most people are not even into these types of weird conspiracy theories. They're just like, no, it's not true. We don't want to hear about some type of far out wacky conspiracy that's most likely false. So I appreciate all of you guys, but I have talked to you about some big true crime breakthroughs. Number 1, the Long Island serial killer being charged with the 4th crime. We now know who the Gilgo Beach killer was. His name was Rex Heuermann. Donna Lass's remains have been identified. And in conclusion, I'm hoping one day I'll be able to talk to you guys like this and say, they found the killer of Missy Beavers. They've identified the remains of Maura Murray, or she's been located somewhere. Those cases that I've followed for years. And of course, the Zodiac Killer, who might actually get some answers. And here is some final concluding note on that. When I was being interviewed by Richard Grinnell on the Zodiac Killer channel, he asked me something about, do you think the Zodiac investigation will turn into a super cold case like Jack the Ripper? And I only partially answered it. I was saying that I'd interviewed Richard Jones of the Jack the Ripper Tour channel in the company, and he said that, he has accepted the result. that he's looked at it for 42 years and doesn't think that it will ever be solved. And the thing that I was only halfway said was, I should have continued by saying, he didn't seem to think that that was a bad thing. It's the reality. He has accepted the reality of the situation, that they're not going to get answers. With the Zodiac case, there is still a chance that it can be solved. There is still a chance that we can get answers and somebody could be convicted for it. If it goes on for another 20 years, it might turn into a super cold case like Jack the Ripper. But I would also have to say that that's going to be the inevitable reality unless they some way, somehow come up with some type of forensic breakthrough. They have a new way of analyzing forensic material. It could happen. It could happen. Thank you so much for everybody for tuning in to this episode, and I will see you on Friday for the Anything Goes segment. And Anything Goes Friday, where any subject is fair game. Signing off for now. Take care.